My precious, my precious.
Such a nerd.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs and Security First IT. And joining me is Donna Grindle of Cardin. What's going on, Donna?
It's going well. I am finally done with being in webinar stuff for 3 weeks.
Whew.
I know. It's just been webinar webcast. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I'm done.
Goodness.
I was very happy about that. But I did have a good time.
You have COB webinars.
Oh, you're such a good.
Well, at least you did the most recent ones. You didn't have to do anything but participate. You know, just
I
listen.
wasn't presenting. I was sitting in on the webcast, which is what I get to share today.
I know. We're going to talk about the annual HIPAA Summit, which is some cool stuff.
I know. People are like, why are you still going to that? Well, first, I have to have CEUs just like everybody else, number one. Number two, I still get stuff. I learn what everybody's thinking about, what's changing, where the direction is, all kinds of things. So it's very much a valuable experience for me.
Yeah.
As you know, at some point, hopefully I can work out my schedule so that I can actually go be there. But having the webcast makes it pretty nice for me to just hop on, and just sit and watch it in the comfort of my own office/home.
Yeah.
Hi.
Well, the other thing too is you get to hear it, straight from the horse's mouth. Because as we know, some of the junk you see published, even from the reputable people, sometimes it's like,
It's like, what did they just say?
It's not really.
Yeah. So yeah, there have been several news articles and headlines that I've read this week, right after the speech of Severino and some of the other people. Then from OCR, there would be a headline about what's going on, and I was listening to the same thing.
It's like, how do they get that from it?
I know. It's like, that's not exactly it. So we're going to clear up some of those.
Yeah.
I was listening. I know.
You were there.
Yeah.
All right. So
I'm ready to go.
And where are you going to be coming up here?
Well, this one comes out April 13th, this episode.
Ooh.
It's hard to believe it's April.
I know.
April.
I'm ready for some warm weather.
That's my birthday weekend, so some stuff will be happening.
Oh, Lord. Everybody send Donna well wishes on her birthday.
Yeah.
When is it now?
Yeah. April 16th.
April 16th. There you go.
I'm the tax baby.
Blow up her Twitter feed.
So anyhow, shortly after that this one comes out, I'm leaving for California, doing the JAWS conference, and then come home for a couple of days, go to Savannah to do the Georgia MGMA conference. And then I have a little bit of time before I go to Dalton for the North Georgia Medical Management Association seminar. So a lot of bouncing around between the time this one goes out, mid-June, but then I can jump on maybe some of my projects. That's what everybody around here keeps hoping for.
I bet they do. Get some work out of you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Not like I don't ever do any work. Never work. That's it. I
know it's hard for me to get anything out of you too.
Yeah, you're the idea guy. I know.
Yeah, right. I know.
But I do have a lot of notes from the summit that I think are really interesting. There's some common themes that seem to be weaved in and out of what everybody was talking about and the questions and all of that. Topics we kept coming back to, if you will. And then, of course, the things I considered big news, but in the way that they were interpreted by me, let's say. Not necessarily the way it was interpreted by others.
All right. Say. Well, we have a lot on this one, so we're going to dive right into it because I think this is probably going to end up being a 2-episode show.
Yes.
But this is from the 27th Annual HIPAA Summit, which, for those of you who are going, what? 27th Annual? Yes, HIPAA is more than 5 years old.
Indeed.
So
it is by far more than 5 years old.
So Donna attended, and she will go through her list, and I will interject my comedy.
You were so full of it.
So obviously there were some common threads that ran throughout the conference, and I didn't read your notes. So
I'm so impressed.
so some of these are like, duh, we've been talking about this forever. And others are like,
there's a lot of it where I was like, do the touchdown move or scream, that's what we say. And so there is a lot of that.
Yeah.
At least we feel like maybe people are listening to us.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the same thing that has been a big theme, every HIPAA summit that I've been to, every one I've sat in on, and this is like, probably the first one was the 21st or 22nd one. I don't remember the numbers, but I've been doing this for years. Same discussions every year. Inadequate SRAs, inadequate risk management, training, BAAs, all those things. Same discussions. None of that's changed. The big change, though, was there is a new theme, and suddenly everybody's talking about this isn't about compliance, it's about patient safety.
what?
Does that sound familiar?
Come on now.
It's like, we say patient care.
Look, if you're going,
multiple presentations were about that.
if you're going to take our stuff, at least give us credit.
Yeah, I know, really. But it was the AMA was one that was pushing it more than most, which was good news as they're representing the physicians. But, a lot of the compliance folks at the big hospital systems and healthcare networks were also saying these are patient safety issues we have to worry about. The good news is apparently everybody's starting to agree with us, but it also brought in some stuff that, it was some discussions that went into depth about some things, and we're going to cover those in a minute, that really got my attention, or maybe in the next episode. But anyway, it was really interesting ways of looking at things. Same topics, but new ways of looking at them that we've covered in some of those security issues, looking at it from a patient safety standpoint for everybody doing it. I got some great information. Big issues, prior authorization. Everybody's having a fit about apparently the time spent doing that has gone through the roof. Through the roof. And there's not any good mechanisms for that, and electronic attachments. There was a ton of discussion about that because, that falls under HIPAA and transaction code sets. And so it just kept coming up over and over. Under that same realm, the ANSI 7030, which I know you're not a transaction nerd, but I am. I got my start working in, electronic claims, and after HIPAA mandated a standardization and they elected to go with the American National Standards Institute EDI format X12, then they started at 4010 version and then they converted to 5010. 5010 caused almost an implosion. It was a complete mess and millions of dollars were spent. And ever since then, no one wants to get involved in doing that again. It was like 10 years ago. So it was such a mess and millions of dollars of it, and there's no ROI to doing it. Zero. No ROI. And each entity's spending a couple of $1 million doing it. And everybody's like, we ain't doing that.
Yeah, no kidding.
So the good news is, yes, it's out there. Yes, it's being talked about, but no one wants to do it. And they were making it clear to everyone, we're not doing it. So that was great news because it's something I've been paying attention to. And Severino, he brought up that patients should have confidence in their being able to tell their doctors anything without it ending up on the internet somewhere, which, he pointed out. He actually had a slide that had Hippocrates or whatever and the Hippocratic Oath. And I do that in my presentations. I've been doing that forever. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying this goes back, to ancient Greece when having the right to privacy with your physician goes back to it. And he was making that same point, which kind of, is a good segue into the big news. This is
Oh, Lord.
These are the items that I thought were the big news from what they said. The thing that is hitting all of the headlines, Severino mentioned it just every year. Devin McGraw has mentioned the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been doing them the last few years when she was in that role. And before her, they all would mention the same thing because it's on their to-do list, is to share the wealth of the fines with the victims. And in a way, whatever they're fining the people, OCR keeps part of it. The organizations, rather, OCR keeps part of it. And then a portion of it goes to the victims.
Mm-hmm.
He just mentioned that, we're still trying to figure that out and we're open to any suggestions.
Right.
Something we've heard. You and I heard that at HIMSS last year.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Still trying to figure that out, open to any. And basically the same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like it was a brand new idea. I've seen multiple headlines since he said that on Tuesday and I'm like, I don't understand that. It was no different than what they've said before. I mean, he basically brought it up and said it was still on the table and said they were looking at it and still trying to figure it out. Isn't that exactly what you got out of the discussion from Devin McGraw at HIMSS last year?
Yeah, maybe they're pulling a page out of the Apple marketing. It's old, but we'll say it's new.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but apparently everybody now suddenly says this is a good thing. But here's the bottom line is I don't really see how that's a big deal. I mean, when you look at a penalty, even like the huge ones,
Mm-hmm.
the $5.5 million,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have several thousands of patients.
Yeah.
And
they'll get a couple dollars.
Yeah, you get $100, $150. I mean, it's not going to make a dent in the actual damages, but what it could result in is people arguing that that's a reason not to allow the class action lawsuits. This is another reason not to allow the class action lawsuits, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
And with that in mind, if you really think about what that's saying, yes, there's a couple of things that it brings up to me. One is it may encourage people to rat you out, number one, which some people should be very aware of. But number two is it will create this false sense of you're going to get reimbursed for some of these costs. And I can tell you from the statistics that if you actually do have your identity stolen or you have your medical identity stolen, even worse, whatever that division of money ends up being, except in the cases where it's like one or two patients and they give them, they were so bad, like in the HIV exposure cases and those kind of stuff. It was so bad, they fined them a ton of money for just a few people, then maybe,
Mm-hmm.
But it's just really not going to be that much of a difference. The big news to me, though, was that he mentioned that one of the things they're looking into is getting rid of the requirement to have a patient sign the notice of privacy practices paperwork. It really, I mean, that's what we always joke about, that everybody says when you say you're in HIPAA and people go, oh, that thing I signed at the doctor. yeah, that's it. That's all they know it as. And people aren't getting educated by it. The people at the front desk don't know how to explain it. In fact, sometimes they can't even find it. So the contract's there. Put it up on the wall and include in the paperwork that you're going to do anyway that see your notice of privacy practices on our website. It's on the wall. Ask for a copy if you want it. Boom, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And it not having to make sure you've got that signature and tracking that is, it's just paperwork.
Yeah, because some providers I go to make me sign one almost every time I go.
Yeah. And that's one of those points is there's tons of confusion about it. So let's get rid of it. There's no value in it really from a patient rights standpoint or a tracking compliance standpoint. And there's no reason to have that signature done. So just get rid of that paperwork. And so I was real excited about it because I would love to just get rid of it because what matters is what's in it. Is it available in the lobby and can I get it on the website?
But he didn't say they were getting rid of it. He just said that that's kind of on the table.
That's one of the main things they're looking at.
Okay.
Because it's the whole thing about deregulation or making regulations easier and this whole drive. And that's a point that they found, which, while it may seem small, if you're the one managing it and signing it every time, it's big.
Okay. Because I know we saw some headlines recently about Severino saying that they're going to get rid of the audits. There'll be no more auditing.
Yeah, well, about that.
Yeah. So just what? I know they had to say something about that because as I read those a few weeks ago, I was like, there's no way you're going to convince me that auditing is going away. But I have seen it, I know 24 times.
Well, first of all, it's a requirement in the law, so they'd have to address that. But also, the director of audits for OCR was a speaker separate from Severino. So 3 people spoke. Severino spoke, then the senior advisor for enforcement spoke, and the audit director spoke, which is Zenithia Clemens. She was a hoot. But actually, both of those ladies were awesome. They're kind of people I think I would like to hang out with after hours. But anyway, she is the one in charge of the audits. And you may say, well, of course she's going to say this because she's in charge of it. But she said that we are committed to the audit program and we are evaluating how best, based on the information we've learned in our other audits, how best to proceed with the audit program.
So can't proceed as you're getting rid of it.
We are committed to the random audit program. We are committed to the random audit program. So it's not like it's going away. It's just they're evaluating, like everything else, they're evaluating the best way to go about it. And the difference is the desktop audits versus the on-site audits. And probably in another episode, we're going to go through just the audit results because now they publish the business associate audits. And there were some points that she made about if we had been doing these on site, it wouldn't have gone as well. She didn't say it that way, but basically her point was some people insisted they had never had a breach ever. Y'all believe that? A large number told us they had never had a request for information, a request for records. And, basically, if you actually went on site, you would look through their records and have a discussion with them about it. But because it was desktop and you just asked for the information, they took what you sent and replied to it. So I think that some of these results would have been worse, and they didn't look good in the first place. We talked about them after, they announced the first ones in the fall. So that was good news. And then somebody came up and asked her in the Q&A and said, so you haven't done any enforcement activity based on these audits yet, have you? It hasn't resulted in any enforcement activity. And she said, not yet. And the whole room went, yes. No, not at this time. She said something along those lines. And everybody kind of leaned forward and started, kind of chuckling. And of course, the moderator was like, but,
yeah, we come in
what
around
are you saying? She's kind of shifting around in her chair trying to figure out how to say it. But the bottom line is, once it all came out, is that if you scored 4 or 5 on any of the elements, which, as you recall, basically everybody did, there were very few people that scored, in some cases, no one scored a 1, and one was like getting an A. Maybe one person scored a 2, a B. Everybody else was C, D, or F. Well, basically, if you got the D or F, they have sent it to your regional office for review to determine if it should be investigated. And those determinations have not been made yet. So she kind of basically said, if you got a D or an F on everything, you're probably going to be investigated. She didn't say it. I'm not saying that she said it. I'm just saying. Anyway, so those were the 3 big news things for me. What the audit program status is and that they are referring them for review, that they're talking about getting rid of the NPP. And even though he just mentioned, I wouldn't have included that as a news item, except everybody's making these headlines about it, so I felt like I had to address it because it wouldn't have been a headline for me.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem like new news to me. It's been in the law, and they've been looking at it.
Right.
But he did mention that he did, again, bring up the thing that ransomware may be a breach. If there is infiltration, exfiltration, loss of data integrity,
Right.
you have to do an analysis.
You got to prove
He said it requires an analysis. That's it. And so all those people who say if you have ransomware, you have to report it, no. And all those people that say if you have ransomware, you wipe and restore, no. He reiterated that. We've been saying that from the beginning, that you got to be prepared to evaluate these is what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I think the confusion was when the guidance came out. It basically said, ransomware is considered a breach unless, and people just stopped. They didn't read the list.
Well, it's considered a breach, and if there is a breach, then it requires an investigation. Period. All they said was it is required to be treated like a breach.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a difference between a breach and a reportable breach. And I think therein lies the problem is that's semantics.
Right.
I mean, there are people that will argue with me about those semantics, and I'm fine with that. I just know what works for me when I'm explaining it to people, and they seem to get that. You can have a breach that you don't have to report. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're done. But he did use a great analogy, and I absolutely loved it, that we can start doing this, but we will give him credit. But he said that he hoped people would treat their information like it was a bar of gold and think about securing it the same way, not like in the same methods, but with the same passion and concern that you would apply to securing the bar of gold, apply that to your data. So if you would worry about all of these things with your one little bar of gold, you've got tons of bars of gold in your computer system. Think about it the same way. That same passion, that same vigor, the same concern is what you should apply to it because that's how valuable the data is.
My precious, my precious.
Such a nerd. But I thought it was a great analogy and a great way to look at it because, people get that concept of, how am I going to, I can't carry it around, but I do have to secure it. And how am I going to do that? And what things am I going to worry about? And how am I going to make sure I can get to it when I need it, but not have other people get to it that don't need any access to it? But, it's the same concept. Mm-hmm. It's a very valuable thing. It's just in the ether, and you can't carry it around with you. There you go. So I thought it was great, and you'll probably hear me expand on that somewhere down the road if you come to some of my sessions. But the other lady that spoke, Serena Mosley Day, is the acting senior advisor for HIPAA compliance and enforcement. She was a hoot. And she apparently was here in the southeastern. They're plucking everybody out of the southeast region out of Atlanta.
That's where all the
Timothy
hacks are.
Timothy Noonan was the director of this region. He's the acting director, taking Devin McGraw's place as an acting director right now. She's up there. I don't know why they're plucking them out of Atlanta. What are you saying?
It's the hotbed, It's where
well, there is a lot of action that happens in Atlanta.
It's where the Dark Overlord lives.
Don't start it. Okay. But what I loved is that she was talking about the enforcement cases, and guess what they were saying, David? You're not going to believe this. They said, everybody keeps asking us for guidance, and on our website are the resolution agreements telling you exactly what we expect to see and what we put them through in their caps.
That sounds so familiar.
I know, it does. It sounds like something we say every time we review one of them.
I'm telling you.
But, that's where I got it. I mean, they are now continuing that the audits are free consulting and the resolution agreements are, So anyway, but Serena Mosley Day, her thing is the cases that she works on as the investigator in her mind, she would create these names for them. And so I would love to get her whole list of the names, because that way it would be easier for me to reference them. Because she called the Raleigh Ortho one, which is where they had all these x-rays, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the old x-ray films apparently had silver in them, that you could mine the silver out of them. And so these people come to him and they say, look, we'll digitize all of your x-rays for free if you'll just let us keep the films and mine the silver out of them. Free.
Huh.
And no business associate agreement, no vetting, no nothing. Hey, free. Something we need done. And so they bring a truck and load up the truck with the x-rays, and then they're never seen again. And, every x-ray has the patient name, date of birth, it's on the film. Never saw him again. It was a con man. And they did probably get all the silver out of it.
Yeah.
They just didn't digitize anything. So she calls it the back the truck up case. And so that was funny. And then she also named, the Memorial Health one that just came out, the huge one,
Mm-hmm.
where they had the office, affiliated physicians' offices, had people still logging in that hadn't worked there in years, but they were still able to use those logins and nobody had ever been shut down. But they also had ex-employees of the hospital that were caught logging in, which prompted the investigation where they found the affiliated offices were still logging in and getting thousands upon thousands of patients. And they got the 5.5 million thing. Well, she called that the 5 o'clock somewhere case. Well, number one, it's in South Florida. And number two, it was people could just come home from their job, grab a cocktail, prop their feet up, and go see how many patients they could pull down. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, which was a hoot. And we'll go through the details of it. But the senior vice president, general counsel, chief privacy officer for Memorial was there on a panel after this, and she goes, "So I've learned I'm in the 5 o'clock somewhere case." But she had some really interesting things to say because of the cap they're under. She had no idea their fine would be so high, and great stuff. But that's for the next episode. We'll never get to it. It's further down my list.
Yeah.
But the Serena Mosley Day said her theme is always "Tell me why it matters." And she had some very intense discussions about, the HIV exposure case. And she told that story in detail. It was horrifying what happened to the guy. And that case was resolved last year as well. That was one of hers. It was not one that you did anything but be horrified about how this guy, because she said, I want you to pretend that I want you to think about how you would have felt if you had been this patient. And then she goes through and tells the story, and it was pretty intense. But she also was asked about doing a BA due diligence, something we have, been pushing for years and all of that. She, of course, said it was a fact-specific determination. But, kind of said, based on what you're doing, it's really a good idea. The FTC speaker also said vetting your vendors is a good idea, not just getting them to sign something. But then she called another case her I got a guy case.
Oh, this ought to be funny.
I got a guy, which we always say, when you say who does your IT, and they it's so and so and so and so, and he comes by after his job, right away that's the I got a guy IT. Well, this was a company they hired to store their medical records. The guy, they didn't do any vetting. They didn't get a BAA. They didn't do a security risk analysis. Nothing. They just hired the guy. Turns out the guy was using somebody in India. And the team in India screws up and posts everything publicly online.
Whoops.
And guess what? I got a guy gone.
Yeah.
Just gone. They can't find him. So that was awesome. I got a guy.
Yeah. Well, it's because people want everything cheap, It just drives me nuts.
They see these deals and they don't think about the repercussions, which is called a security risk analysis, which is, and there was a further discussion. And I like this one because you and I have had this discussion before about a vendor. And I don't know if you recall that case, but I don't know if we should call it out. But it was a vendor who was putting together some MSP tools, a well-known vendor, and they were putting together some MSP tools. And they claimed they didn't have to sign a business associate agreement because they were never going to see the PHI. They were going to outsource that to other companies who would actually have possession, and they would be the ones. And so the question came up with the same thing because somebody was saying they had a vendor that was saying this, and it made me wonder if it was the same vendor. And there was a term they used, because we always use upstream and downstream. They were using prime BA. So the prime BA is the one I have a contract with, and that's who I'm going to worry about. Prime.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were having that same scenario, saying the one they signed the contract with, their prime BA, claimed that they never saw anything and didn't need to sign the BAA. So they asked Severino and Mosley Day in their Q&A session, that question came out. And you could see the two of them. They were up there, you know. You could hear them on live mic. Well, it's both of you. And Severino said, basically by the end of it, and there was this whole discussion and questions and further things, and the final thing was he said that you either go with the suspenders and the belt.
Okay.
Which is funny. Which is have both of them sign a BAA, or only the prime signs a BAA. And the reason behind that is you're buying services from the prime.
Right.
The prime may elect to have a new subcontractor. That means you're going to have a new BAA with the subcontractor. And you won't have any choices about it. And you don't get to vet them the same way, and so on and so forth. So it was, either get it from both or only get it from the prime, which I thought was really interesting because we've been through that discussion before.
Yeah, and we've always said, we've had this discussion with MSPs that outsource stuff. I do that. I never touch the data. It goes from, the CE to my vendor. I never touch it, but I have the BA with my client, and then I have the BA with the subcontractor.
That's how it works.
You have to have the chain. You can't jump chains and all that. It has to be a chain.
Well, yeah, because the whole point is you're selling the service.
Right.
And you could be doing it at your office. You're just choosing not to. That doesn't alleviate your liability. And that is one that people really need to get. They need to understand that. It was an interesting discussion, let's just say, and one that I found very telling. Yeah,
but to your point, we've changed vendors before, and the client doesn't really know. We might switch backup vendors. In our vertical, we do that. I wouldn't say frequently, but every couple of years or so, we have to make sure we're still using the best in breed vendors and pricing and all the other stuff. So we might move stuff around.
Yeah. So that's the bottom line. Either suspenders and belt, which was really funny, but it's either both signed or the prime signs. There was no any argument for skipping the prime.
Yeah. That's the point.
Yeah. So if that is the business you want to be in, you need to be reevaluating it quickly. And if any vendor tries to tell you that, you need to say belt and suspenders.
But I'm outsourcing all up to my EHR company.
Yeah, there you go. Everybody up there handles it. And I can tell you, he actually said belt and suspenders. Okay? I didn't make that up. He said it, so you can quote it. Severino said, but clearly the OCR is very involved in their enforcement, and they're bringing up, they brought up the cases that is all about, here are the things that are all published on our website where we tell you all of this, and we're saying these are the things we expect to see, and here are the mistakes people made. Can't you just learn from them? And they did mention, she delivered the message very strongly. It matters to the patients. This is about patient safety and patient rights. So it was throughout the whole thing is reiterating the whole patient safety, patient rights, but still the back the truck up, the 5 o'clock somewhere, we're going to have to go back and come up with our own names if I can't get them. We're keeping those. Those are great, but we're going to have to come up with our own names. She did tell the story. The one they resolved where the company just went out of business, Filefax, is one of the last resolutions this past year. Mm-hmm. She told the story in detail where it was a company that was supposed to be storing medical records, right? And they were going out of business, and there was this whole big thing about disposing of the records. According to media reports in the area, that someone at the company let somebody know where a dumpster full of paper was so that they could use it to recycle it and get money for it, because it was a massive amount of paper. That's what the media reports were. And that when they found it, it was all these records that the Filefax was supposed to be getting rid of. What the OCR folks tell us is that is kind of like back the truck up. Mm-hmm. They put all the records, supposedly this is the story they got. All the records were put into a truck, and they didn't worry about locking the truck. Right away, you're like, what?
Yeah.
They didn't worry about locking the truck because a snowstorm was happening. And this snowstorm made it where the truck was inaccessible for 2 weeks.
Good grief.
Yeah, this is the story they get. I mean, seriously, this is the story they were told. It was inaccessible for 2 weeks. And then when they finally were able to get to the truck, it was empty and they don't know what happened.
Okay.
That was just too much for me. I mean, she couldn't get through it without chuckling. I mean, come on. A 2 week snowstorm making the truck inaccessible that you didn't lock it because you didn't. Why would.
If I can't get to it, nobody can get to
it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, come on. Well, if there was a 2 week snowstorm, there should have been footprints or tire tracks or something.
Wow.
Anyway, it was quite a hoot. And they did make a point on the other one, because that was the business that had gone out of business and they got their money out of them. And the other one of, I'm just going to file bankruptcy, and you won't get anything out of me. We hear that argument, all the time. Mm-hmm. That one, they made sure they got their money and a corrective action plan, because they knew with Chapter 11 means you're reorganizing and making a new organization. And they wanted to make sure the new organization followed the rules and got in line with their compliance. And that's why they fought that one and got the money. They got a couple $1 million, I want to say.
Huh.
So this is a good place to stop, because we've got several more topics to go into. I mean, but this was, 2 full days of me listening to people talk about stuff that I get, all nerdified about. So, but those are the things so far that I found interesting and excited to share with all of you, so that you didn't have to sit through it.
Yep. So some things we expected to hear, other things we didn't expect to hear. and we didn't know how often these same people listen to our podcast, because they're taking a lot of stuff away from it. So we're glad you guys over there, OCR, listen.
I know, really?
All right, that's our show for today, folks. Please remember to follow us and share us out on your favorite social media site. You can rate us on our podcasting app. Go out there and grab that. It's pretty awesome. Help us out in spreading the word. It's working. You guys are doing great. We're getting tons of new listeners every week. If you have any kind of questions you'd like for us to possibly share on a future podcast, and send those in to contact@helpmewithhipaa.com. We'll check them out. So remember, for Donna and myself, the HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me With HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.